Okay, so basically, what is a literature review? It's a systematic way of you reviewing documents, right? A systematic identification of necessary information related to research problem. You already have a particular problem that you're interested in. Maybe you found the problem in the industry, all right? So all these problems, there are many solutions to it. So that's where you look at the literature. First of all, you want to find out, are other people trying to address the same problem? Other parts of the country experiencing the same problem, in Malaysia, for example? And how do people, what are the recommendations to solve this particular problem? So you go for the literature to understand deeper about the problems. Sometimes it's not just about the solution. It could also be about, understanding more about the problem. What are the underlying issues about the particular problem that you are interested in? Okay. The second point is an examination of the research that has been conducted in a particular field of study. I think you already know this. You need to fit your research into the big jigsaw puzzle. So you need to examine other people's work on the similar field, on the similar problem, and see what has been done and what's not been done. Right? Okay. Other people have, like, for example, Hart agrees with the notion but expanded the definition to the selection of available documents and the effective evaluation of these documents in relation to the research being proposed. Now, the question is, do you review all documents? Because you need to be very selective when you want to review literature. Why do I say this? It's because, for example, I think the easiest source that people always refer to when we talk about literature review are journals. Now, the first question is, are those journals reliable? Where they inform you what are the blacklisted journals. So publications that are published in these blacklisted journals are not reliable. So you can't cite those journals, right? Because it's not reliable. It's blacklisted. So I would always recommend that you go for at least a Scopus level journal. I think we'll go to that standard criteria more later on. All right. And it's not just about reviewing what's been done and what has not been done. You also need to have a critical thinking when you examine a particular article, right? A critical look at the existing research that is significant to the work that you're carrying out. It has to be, sometimes, especially when you want to get ideas, right? Sometimes it's difficult for you to come up with your own idea without reviewing other people's work. So when you take other people's work, you look at their ideas. This person might have idea A, and this person might have idea B. They're trying to solve. They're looking at the same problem. So maybe you can combine both of that, right, to come up with your own idea, all right? And not just about ideas; it's also about looking at their methodologies, or where can you improve in these two research, in these two articles for that particular research. Okay. All right. Literature, it's a microscopic assessment on a specific topic as the main objective or issue as stated in the research. Yes, it can be microscopic, meaning it's focusing just on your area, especially when you submit for example, proposals. You have to be focused into your particular area to show how your research fits into the body of knowledge, and where can you improve in the current existing of knowledge. It's also an overview investigation on the subject and solutions to relevant research questions. I'm going to highlight that research questions. At the end of your literature review, your literature must be able to meet that person. All right. So I'm going to continue with my second point. So an overview of investigation on the subject and solutions to relevant research questions. I was going to highlight research question. You have to make sure that your literature will justify why you have this particular research question. Okay. I find that a lot of students, they tend to put everything in the literature and it's not really focused and it doesn't really support the research question. Your research question has to be a new research question. If your research question can be answered just by reviewing literature, that is not a good research question. You're supposed to find questions that are not be able to be answered through the literature. That's why you need to do a research on it, right? Okay. That's where you provide the foundation for the research problem. Okay, so you got a link. So you have your research problem, you go to the literature to find your research question, and that's how people look whether your literature review is solid or not. Okay. A precise survey of what we know and what we do not know about an assigned issue. Yes, that's a basic fundamental thing about reviewing a literature. We need to know what other people have been done and what we don't know. Okay, you have a research question, but when you go through the process of critical thinking, it might not really answer that research question. So there you have it, a good research question, because that particular the process that you went through reviewing the literature was not able to answer your research question that you posed. Okay. Right. Attain a what is your aim? Attain a good knowledge of the field of study. So you need the background information that is basically about knowing what people have, knowing what has been done and what's not been done. Identify other people working in the field and similar work. That's very important because when you find, you will know which author is a pioneer in that field, is the expert in that field. So when you have questions or if you're stuck or somewhere, you can always contact that particular author. I think that's really good. So when you communicate to the person, you're able to get the latest information about that particular research that you're interested in. Okay, and that could help you further refine your research question as well. All right, and it's not only that, not just the opportunity to communicate with these experts in the field. You can also know what's the current research being done by these people who are working in the similar field of research that you are interested in. All right. Identify gaps and the inconsistencies. This is where the critical part comes in. You, after reviewing literature, we'll go into what literature is, what you need to review. You will find what I mean by gap is what's missing, and sometimes the findings are quite inconsistent. For example, let's say you want to know about, are people who occupies in green buildings, do they practice energy efficient or not, or when they are working in a green building, right? And you found few studies who said yes, the people who work in green buildings, they actually do practice energy saving behavior. But then you also read another pool of studies who said that there's that they found that the findings was the opposite. It was not really energy efficient. A lot of people relied on the technology to reduce energy. So when you those are international contexts, for example. And then when you look at in Malaysia context, there's not much evidence to support this conclusion, right? So before you come to a conclusion, you need to have several reasons to support your conclusion, right? but your reasons are all inconsistent. Therefore, there's no conclusion. And that could be a justification of why there is a need for you to do the research, all right, so that you can provide a conclusion. All right. Now, point number 3, rationalize the purpose and reasons for conducting the research. Identify the path and breadth of previous research and how current research is related to them. Yes, obviously, just by identifying the gaps and inconsistencies, you will be able to come up with your own rationality of what is the purpose and reason, why is it important to carry out the research, and how, how can your research improve that particular area, okay? And you can also identify patterns and trends in the previous research, and how is it related to one each other. All right, let me see if I can find maybe I'll get back to that point if I can find an example for that. For example, okay, point number 3, you want to come up with, I'm going to go back to that topic about energy saving behavior, right? So you want to find out what are the strategies that I can propose to encourage energy saving behavior. And when you look at the guidelines available, let's say from Suruhanjaya Tenaga, all these government organizations that are pioneer in energy efficiency, they already have guidelines and so on. But you look at the guidelines and you compare with the international guidelines, for example, there are some items that are quite missing. So you wanna combine all of these guidelines to make one comprehensive guideline, for example, and then you want to test it out. Okay, so you could also do that. That is also you can rationalize it. You rationalize the purpose of it. You can say that the current guideline in Malaysia to encourage energy saving behavior is not effective enough, because if you look at the latest research that has been done, although the sample of respondents is quite small, but it indicates that maybe the awareness level of people on energy saving behavior is still poor. And if we compare it to the international context, how come it's better? Is it because their guideline is better? How are they doing it differently? And so on. All right. And then you will come to a part where you will generate that research question, especially after reading a lot of materials, and you find that there's no conclusive answer to this research question. Okay. And then if you're doing a quantitative study, you will come up with some hypothesis. Methodology. This is very important. When you look at a similar research field, looking at the same problem, and then you want to propose your methodology, right? So you need to know what are the methodologies that other people are doing to solve this problem, because maybe you can introduce a different methodology. For example, maybe in this study, they have always used quantitative research methodology to answer this research question. But there's a limitation of that. We don't know, we can't understand why and how. Why does this happen? Why is it like this? Why are the findings like this? So your methodology could be, you want to do a qualitative research methodology. You want to adopt a qualitative research methodology in your research to be able to answer the whys and how of this particular scenario, which was not answered in the literature. All right. Point number 6, establish your study is one link in a change of research that is developing knowledge in your field. If you look at the diagram above, I think I've mentioned this already. So everyone's research is important. You're not trying to say that your research is more important than other people's work. No, it's just trying to say that how does your small research fit into other people's work to answer a particular question that has not been answered yet. Okay, so all of these jigsaw puzzles that you can see here, they're all trying to address the same problem. For example, I think the common problem is climate change. Everyone know that that the emission of carbon globally is an adverse impact to a lot of things. So you want to reduce that by introducing what and what and what, right? Point number 7, to learn from the idea of others and promote new thoughts. I think that's where you get ideas mostly from, especially from literature. Sometimes you borrow ideas from the business management. They have, for example, in business, they are now transitioning to online businesses, right? And they are recommending a few models or whatever that works in their organization. So you looked at the business model, oh, this looks like something new, and you want to apply it into the construction field. Maybe you want something to be also electronic and for example, BIM. So you can borrow that business model and apply it into the construction field or other fields, management, social science. Okay, because now it's difficult to do a research where it's not a blended. It has to be transdisciplinary research. So you need to borrow from other fields of research and apply in the research context that you're interested in. Okay. This is what a lot of people do. Annotated bibliography. You just summarize. This person has done this person has done that without any critical input in it. Collection of materials on a topic, just put everything inside. Let's say, for example, definition. A defined BIM as this. B defined BIM building information modeling as this. C defined building information modeling as this. But there are no thoughts. You didn't analyze that. Maybe you're supposed to look at what did most people say about it. What did the least number of authors say about the definition of BIM? And then you justify your opinion. What do you think BIM is? And then you use other people's work to support your opinion. Right? That's why I mentioned a series of summaries. A lot of people do that. I think the first step of doing a good literature review is obviously you need to do a series of summaries for your own self, not for you to submit to your supervisor. All right. At the very initial stage, when you want to review, you obviously need to summarize what you understand about a particular article. You don't have to do it in a paragraph for your own self. Personally, when I do a series of summaries, I do it in the table. So I have to have a summary first, and then only I am able to analyze those summaries and put it into context, put it into themes, analyze it and so on. Masses of facts, examples, and quotations. All of this you can put it in your own personal journal. I think every postgraduate student who is doing research must have their own journal. So you put the facts and examples and quotations or whatever that you have read so that you don't forget about it, right? Sometimes when you're writing, you know someone has said this, but you're not sure who said it. So you want to avoid that to happen, okay? An argument about the importance of your research. Yes, it's not telling everyone that your research is better than everyone else. I think you can relate back to that jigsaw puzzle I was telling you. You just need to show how does your research improve or add value to the body of knowledge, okay? And suggestions for further reading. That is not a literature review, okay? Yes, in the beginning, when you want to start, you will ask all these questions. Where do I start? What to review? Is this enough? How to review? How to write? When I first started my research as well, I've experienced this as well. All right, so I've gone through the same process as you all have done. All right. And then when you submit your work to your supervisor, you get this comment, you just cut and paste. It's too superficial, too much irrelevant information, there is no review. But when you receive these kind of comments, do you think it really helps you? For me personally, it doesn't help because I don't know where to improve and how to improve. I think that's where um, being constructive giving out constructive comments is really important to you from the supervisor, all right, so that you know how to improve instead of being just stuck, all right. Okay, now the things that you need to review, we were mentioning about journal articles. That's the most common one, but you need to be selective. It has to be applicable, current, and it has to be peer reviewed as well. There are like those blacklisted journals, they're not peer reviewed, right? So that's why it's not a reliable source, right? And journal articles, they have many categories on the quality standard of it. So the highest standard would be if it is indexed from ISI index from the Web of Science, and or the second ranking of quality is at least Scopus. So if it's in the Scopus database, it's a reliable journal for you to cite. All right. And the rest of the journals, it isn't. You can also cite it, but just make sure that it's not blacklisted. I'm not saying that you can only cite those journals that are of that are high quality. I'm not saying that, but you need to be selective, and it also has to be current, at least 5 years. If you cite something that is perhaps 10 years ago, and then you say that no one has looked into this area, obviously the examiners would question, um, I mean, whether this is true or not. And if that examiner is the expert in the field, he would know that this is not true. Okay. Conference proceedings, you can look through conference proceedings. That's a really good source of information as well, because you can get the latest information from conference proceedings. What's the latest research that people have been done? That's the reason why people attend conferences, actually. It's to get ideas from people looking at the same problem. All right. Dissertations, books, monographs, government reports, and all these can be used for you to analyze, right, and find information. But there are how to say, I think there's a next slide on this about when do you go for journals, when do you go for conference decisions, books, and other things, right? So the process that you need to go is you need to be selective, you need to understand, analyze, and synthesis. That's the most crucial part in doing a literature review. If you're still a bit blur about how do people synthesize, what you can do is you can go to good selected journals like Journal of Cleaner Productions. Those are ISI journals, and look for conceptual papers, right? Because conceptual papers are articles that reviews other people's work, secondary sources, and they come up with themes to derive a conclusion or suggest what's the future research for this particular area, all right? And you can look at what the pattern of writing and how they do it, all right? So at the end of your literature review chapter, you should be able to come up with the background information, the gaps, what's missing, what is not known, the importance of the topic, and it should support your research question or your research framework or hypothesis, right? What are the common methodologies that has been used? Sometimes you can use the same methodology as well. For example, let's say you want to look at people's level of comfort in a building, all right? So there are already established questionnaires, or some researchers call it established instrument tools to measure the comfort level. Okay, so you can use that for your thesis. So meaning, or you can modify that instrument tool in your research. Okay. Another example is, for example, you want to measure people's resiliency level. Okay, do you come up with your own questionnaire, or is there already an established tool to measure this? That's where you need to look at the methodology. And it turned out to be, yes, there are already established tools which are used by medical doctors um, to level a person's stress level, for example, okay, to measure their resiliency level. But you can modify those tools. Obviously, you would need to go into the process under which is you need to do a pilot survey to ensure that your modified instrument tool is understood by everyone. I mean, your population of respondents. And then the most important thing that that examiners would look in your literature is your work, the link between your work and the body of knowledge. That goes back to number 2, which is identifying the gaps. All right. If you look in any journal articles, right, especially in the introduction, at the last paragraph, you'll realize how they establish the research question or the research objective for that particular paper at the end of the paragraph in introduction section. Okay. I think I've explained this already. So all the materials that you use to review, it must have these 3 characteristics. It has to be current, applicable to your topic, and it is peer reviewed. Okay. Is there anything else I would like to add on here? I don't think so. All right. Current means, yeah, at least 5 years. It's applicable to the topic. All right. I think that would just be a repetition of what I said earlier in this slide before. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Sources of a literature review. It's now in the diagram on input, right? I mentioned about journal articles. So the common database that you can go on through is Science Direct, Wiley Online Library, ProQuest, Scopus, and etc. If you go through all these search engine database, mostly are indexed by Scopus. Okay. Those blacklisted journals that I mentioned, usually people go through Google Scholar and then they found a journal and they just cite that journal. All right. So that's why you need to be quite careful. Okay. Last time the USM library had ProQuest, but recently I tried to access ProQuest. They no longer subscribe to it. I'm not sure if they have renewed their subscription. ProQuest is actually very good. You can get PhD theses from all over the world, especially mostly are from the United States. And it's really important that you get theses, because we look at point number 3. There's a section that points out the future research. So if you get the latest PhD dissertations, or if you're doing master's dissertation, there will be a section on the future research and a section on the limitations. Okay, limitations or future also signifies where you can contribute. All right. Conference proceedings, it's helpful in acquiring the related research studies. And okay, yes, because usually proceedings are really, really short, and it's just to present the ideas or preliminary findings. It's good to get ideas from conference proceedings, or if you can attend conferences, it's good for you to get ideas from there. All right. So dissertations, I pointed out already. Usually you can get dissertation from ProQuest. But now, what search engine database that you can use, I'm not sure, right? think you can ask the library what's a similar search engine database as ProQuest. ProQuest was really helpful. Books. Okay. When do you refer to books? Books are usually for something, you have a particular question in your mind and you need to answer that. And it's to answer some fundamental questions. For example, energy benchmark. Okay, how do people develop energy benchmark? There's already books written on that. So you can refer to anything that is fundamental. The books are the best source of reference. Initial concepts or theories. Oh yes, theories and concept theories. Theories are always you need to apply theories in your dissertations, right? So theories can also be retrieved from books. Because if you go to journals and articles, they only write a very short section on the theory itself. So if you want to have a deeper understanding about the theory, you go for books. Same goes to research methodology. You need to justify why you choose that research methodology, right? So you go into books to find reasons on when can you use this research methodology? How is it, basically about reasons, trying to get the reasons to justify why you choose that research methodology. Because in journals, they just have a very short paragraph on the research methodology that they use and the reasons for it. But if you go to books, there's a lot more answers to that question. Monographs and government reports. Government reports are really good because it provides the current, let's say, current stats. For example, you want to see about property, okay, and you look at the government report to see how many. I don't know if there's I think there is statistics on property data from the government, right? So that would help you. Or another example is it could also become a problem statement. Like, for example, you look at the government website and you found that there's a lot of teachers' quarters which are vacant. They're not used. Okay, so you can use that as a problem statement. You're saying that it's a wasteful of resource. It can be adapted into something else. Reuse it. Right. So government reports are very crucial as well, and it can also point out the gap, like how you can improve the existing government documents such as guidelines or whatever. Okay. All right. This is just to point out you need to know the differences between primary and secondary sources. If you look at the first one written by Dr. Erna herself, so she introduced a theory. Now it's a primary source because she collected the data, and from that data she produced the theory. So that's a primary source. When you use your own data to introduce something, that is a primary source. Secondary sources are like the conceptual paper. You're using other people's work, you review it, and you draw conclusions. All right. Did I miss anything? Okay, some titles are such as state-of-the-art analysis. So these are all secondary sources because they are using other people's findings and you are reviewing it to come up with your own finding. Okay, for example, like that. A review paper on organizational culture and organizational performance. My advice is, especially in the first year of your research journey, I will highly recommend that you write a conceptual paper on your literature section, on your chapter 2. That would really help you. You're going to get feedbacks from the reviewers in the particular journal, and that would help you to improve your chapter 2. Okay, so start. If you don't write a review paper, you can also go for conferences. Conferences also accept conceptual papers, and you can get feedback from the reviewers as well to see whether or not your literature is good enough. Does it support your research question? Does it support your research objective? Right? Okay, the process that you need to go through: find and select. Okay, we will go through that. You need to understand, analyze, and synthesis. So, remember when I said in the previous slide about what is not literature review? A series of summary. You still need to do that for step number 2 to comprehend. For me personally, I still have to do a series of summaries for myself so that I understand before I analyze it. Okay? You read the abstract, you look at the figures, go back to the surfing to the web. I did read that paper you gave me. I'll definitely add it to my reference list. Okay, so it's going to be the same process every time. That is why it's very important that you have a reference managing tool so that you can jot down notes inside there. But for me personally, I have my own manual journal where I write in whatever that I found and then put the source of the name of the author and the year so that I don't miss out. Okay, up to you. That is my own personal preference. Right? But still, I use softwares like Mendeley, especially when it comes to writing, so that I don't have to waste time inputting all the information in the reference tool. All right. Okay, find and select. How do you find? Searching for materials to review can be hard because a lot of people have problems in finding the article that they should review. You need to have, if you find one article that is very similar to your research topic, notice under the abstract that there are keywords under the abstract, right? So you can either use those similar keywords to find literature that are relevant to it, all right? That's one way. Another way is you can do backward searching, meaning you click on the name of the author, who's the first author of that paper, and then you see who has cited that paper, so you can trace their research work just by clicking on their name, because every researcher will have their own Scopus ID. They will have their own ORCID ID, right? So from there you can trace what research that has been done up till today by the same person, right? Or you can do forward searching, meaning when you go to Google, you will see under the name of the article you will see now how many numbers of people who have cited this particular article, right? So you can click on that and see who has cited this article. So from there you can also refine the list and see what are the work that is relevant to it and how have people used that finding, original finding, to their work. Okay. Example here. So the first one is either you can look at the keywords. So this is about innovation, creation, innovation, adoption, and firm characteristics in the construction industry. Right. So innovation, creation, and innovation, adoption. Okay. So the keywords for that, she wrote down firm characteristics, construction industry, innovation, adoption, innovation, creation. Now, when you search, use the word, for example, innovation, adoption. You may not find it in the construction industry. You may find it in other industry, maybe perhaps manufacturing industry, or other disciplinary besides construction, to get more ideas about what is innovation, adoption, how do people adopt innovation. The second way of searching is you trace by the name of the author, all right, to see what other work that has been done in the same research area, all right. Or you can also look at the list of references that the author cited. And from there, you can also see what are the papers that are relevant to you, to your topic, just by looking at the title of the article. And you will notice who are the pioneers in your research field, who are the experts, who have done a lot of research in that particular research. Okay, this is what I meant by you go to Google Scholar and you see how many numbers they've cited. You look at cited by 12, only 12 people have cited this work. You look at the second article, there's 1,351 people who have cited this article. So this signals that this must be a very good article to read, and and to improve your understanding about the topic if it is still on firm characteristic. Okay. Okay, when do you end your literature review journey? Obviously, it's the law of saturation. You will come to a point where you will come to a point where you find that people have been talking about the same issue, and still there's no answer to it. That's number one. All right. And then you discover that new articles only introduce familiar arguments, methodologies. Funny, yeah. You will see that there are similar trends or patterns, similar findings which are still inconclusive. So all of this, when you want to write when you want to write your literature review, you can use this to put an end and conclude that, look, for this research question, you reviewed this much of articles and still none of it have really answered your research question. Okay. Or a lot of people have been saying that this is the same problem, and still no one has recommended an effective strategy to solve it, for example. Okay. This is just an example. This is EndNote. The USM library doesn't use EndNote as well. We use Mendeley. I personally prefer Mendeley because I've had bad experience using EndNote. The whole thing crashed and I had to do it manually. But Mendeley is free and you can access your references anytime. So you can work on your paper anywhere, even if it's on a different laptop. Okay. So it works similar like Mendeley. You can create folders, subtopics under the folder, and you can reorganize your literature through that. And also you can, when you click on the particular article, you can jot in your own notes that are important, or you can highlight in that in the file that you attach into the referencing tool software. Okay. So this is just another example. And you can also simply change the referencing style. I think that's very important, especially when you're writing into a journal. For your chapter, usually we use APA, but for some journals, when you want to submit your article to a journal, they require it to be in IEEE. So rather than wasting time changing it manually, you can automatically change it through this reference managing tool. Right. I think we're coming to the last end of our slide already. So things to extract when reviewing the literature. You don't have to read the whole thing unless if it's really very, very similar to your topic. You look at what were the conclusion findings that was drawn from the research. How did the authors justify their research? The arguments that was built in the article. What were the methods that they used? And if there's a hypothesis, what is the problem? Or if there's some definitions or concept introduced which are not written in a book, for example, and the theories that they have used. This is very important. What theories that have been used by other people in their research that is similar to yours, because you can use the same theory or modify the theory. Right, analyzing the literature. So this is one way of doing it. You can put it in a table where you classify. I think the first stage when you do this table, you wouldn't really know what to classify, what are your categories. So you can either do it by Article 1, Article 2, by the names of the author. And then concept 1 and concept 2 could be, for me personally, I would have, obviously the first column I would have problem statement. And then the second column I would have what were the findings. Third column I would have what were the methodologies that they used, right? And the fourth column would be what else is important. Things that are inside this diagram. You have to have this first before you do a summary, before you are able to analyze anything, because from there you will realize there are some things that are quite similar. Maybe, for example, in column 1 we were talking about the problem. Oh, okay, Article 1 in, for example, in Brazil, and Article 2 in Malaysia, they're also facing the same problem. Okay, the similar problem. When you look at the conclusions, they are recommending different strategies. Right? You start to think and analyze from your table before you write. Okay. You will find literature not just in your field. You will find literature in other discipline area. So you need to use that, all of that, and convert it into a table for you to see the connectivity and the relationships of these ideas. Remember when I mentioned earlier about the business model in the beginning of the lecture? So maybe you find a similar problem, but from an economic perspective, okay? And they are trying to solve the problem from an economic perspective. You can borrow those ideas and put it into your research. So that's where you can get ideas. What are the different ideas from all these different disciplinary area? Idea 1, idea 2, idea 3, and what were the sources that you took from? Okay, and does it answer your research question? It's important that you write down your research question so that you don't become lost. Sometimes when you read too much, you become lost. Like, what did I just read? You always have to come back to your research question. Okay, does this answer my research question? Is this enough to answer my research question? And you always have to be skeptical about people's findings to see how can you improve it, to give a conclusive answer to your research question. All right. Okay, synthesis, putting separate facts together to form a single piece of work. So that's where you do that. First, you've already identified the themes, right? And then from there, you analyze it. And then when you combine everything, that's the process of synthesis. So you try to put everything into one to make sense of all these different works to make sense, right? So the definition is to synthesize, is to combine two or more elements to form a new whole. In the literature review, the elements are the findings of the literature together, and the whole new is the conclusion you draw from those findings. Example is like the guideline that I mentioned to you. So I reviewed guidelines in Malaysia. I reviewed guidelines in other neighboring countries. I reviewed guidelines and I saw different things in each of these guidelines. So I want to combine all of these different items into one so that my new guideline is more comprehensive. That is an example. Okay. Okay, this is another example. This has already been themed, right? But it's not been analyzed yet. Okay, so you can see, for example, in row number 2, it says hardships and oppositions women face. So the first hardship, it's saying that women's presence in male military settings are resented. Okay, there's tension, social tension inside in a military environment. And second researcher found that another problem is almost similar, but they are discriminated by given extensive physical and mental tests. Okay, so it's the same problem but in a um, different way, isn't it? Or another problem is to explain the hardships that the women face. The women are being given jobs that are unskilled, right? Because they see that there's no reason to train these women, so they're not equal as men. So you from there you can see, okay, probably Cornelson and Stewart are talking about the same similar issue, and Bruley is talking about a different problem. So from there you can start to filter which one you can combine and which one you can put it as a new item or a new example to explain the hardships theme. Okay, I think basically you get the picture. What I'm trying to say here is, right? Critical analyzing, classifying and identifying the importance of the information. All right. Okay, if you look at the column in the box in red color, it says that data mining is the analyzing and interpretation of large amounts of information. Through analyzing vast amounts of data, it is possible to find patterns and relationships in order to make correlation. Okay, this doesn't have any analysis. So how can you use that same text, but you add values? When you analyze it, you try to change it so that it has value. So the one that is underlined, now you're saying that data mining is a process of discovering new knowledge, right? So you can use information without analysis and turn it into something that can add value to it. Okay, give you another example on the next slide. Okay. Oh, sorry. Right. How do you give your interpretation of this statement? It says here, green practices, it leads to increase in operating costs and subsequently limit firms' profitability. So that was a finding from this Article A, for example. So how can you use this finding and turn it into, give it a new interpretation? Well, first of all, you can say that your argument is, remember you need to have an argument about it. You can say, well, this particular researcher is looking at a short-term effect of green practices. But if we look at the long run, because they didn't talk about anything about the long run, right? It will reduce energy and maintenance costs, and therefore it can increase a firm's profitability. That's one way, one angle to look at it. So that particular author just looked at it in the short-term effect. So you can argue back and say, what about the long-term effect, right? Okay, another way of looking at it. Now, the above view is based on firms' financial performance. However, green practices give positive effect on the firm's overall performance in terms of environmental performance, good image, and goodwill. So you can argue back saying that, he's only looking at the perspective of the firm's financial performance. But if you look at the environmental performance, actually it is something positive. Okay, so basically those are examples of how you do a synthesis, all right, in your literature, how you argue other people's work and put your own thoughts into it. Okay. Techniques for synthesizing. I just showed earlier examples of tables, but this is just another example that I'd like to share with you. For example, how do you measure LAD, liquidated certain damages, right? And you found that people have already researched, there's a lot of research already been done about how to measure LAD, how to ascertain whether it's genuine or not, since 1984. But over the time when you review the literature, you found that, actually there's a lot of different ways of measuring LAD, for example. So you write down all the factors that people use to measure LED found by this, found by the first article, right? And then you can do color coding, for example, to see. For example, supervision has been repeated quite several times, so you know that's a common factor accepted by a lot of researchers. But maybe transaction cost, business disruption, which is not highlighted. How come those two are not repeated in all of these similar researches? Or you could combine all of these different factors into one and come up with your new list of factors to see which one applies to Malaysia context. All right. You can also do a mind map, especially when you are reading literature from different disciplinary area, and you need to see how you can link that different discipline area into your discipline area. All right. So doing a mind map helps you to see the connectivity and the relationships. Okay, and to see in which particular area, because when you look at discipline area, it's really huge. So by doing a mind map, you know where does your work fit into the whole mind map picture, right? How to write a literature review? Well, there's no fixed rule in how to write it, but usually usually it's a common way of writing. You start wide, for example, but don't write too much about something general. At the end of the day, you need to support your research question. Okay, that is why at the top peak of this diagram, it has to be filled with specific papers talking about your topic, and all of this writing should support your research question, why it needs to be done. Okay. How to write it? Okay. So if we can give you an example, you can write it long shots. So that's long shots, meaning you provide a solid sense of background first, you talk, but not too much of background information. Right? Or you could do it in middle distance shots where you have key figures and elements to be examined or brought clearly into the view. And then only you talk about at the last end of the paragraph, then only you talk about your specific research. Or you do close-up shots where the precise focus of your work is pinpointed. I think all of this depends on where you want to write. If it's going for a journal paper, it's a combination of probably number 2 and number 3 close-up shots. If it's for a research proposal, right, when it comes to writing literature review, it's a close-up shot. If I quickly plot in what I need, quickly give the examiners the answers about what's been done and what's not been done in this particular area of research. So it really depends on where you want to write this literature review and for who is it, all right? So usually for thesis, it has to be long shots. You need to have a solid sense of the background, okay? And theses are all thick, right? All right, okay. And you can also write in a chronological way of writing, meaning you can say, at the beginning of the research, people looked at this area, blah, 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 according to the timeline. So from new to old or old to new. So it depends on what is it that you want to talk about at the end of the literature chapter. If you just simply write it according to timeline without any analysis, it's worthless. It's it doesn't have any value or meaning. So you need to know when to use which writing style. All right, and looking at the timeline also actually helps you to determine whether your research is outdated or is it up to date or not. Okay, and also to prevent from replication of the same research. Okay, because if you just review literature that is between 5 years, it may not. It could be that someone have already done your research 10 years ago, and you missed out that part. So that's why it's important for you to trace the origin of the work. Who was the first person who did the research in this particular area? And then you start looking at it. Oh, okay, then people have um, started to explore in this area, in that area, and so on. Okay, I think I've explained this already. So you need to make sure that you have all these checklists. Background information in your thesis. So this is long shots, right? You need to have a background information. You need to also include the gaps, the importance of the topic, how you develop your research question, the research framework, conceptual, theoretical, the common methodologies that are used and what methodology that you are going to use, and how your study relates to the knowledge in your field. Right, conceptual framework. I think these are the things that you want to study. So, for example, this one. This is a conceptual framework. If you look at this, these are the things that that the researcher wants to study about absorptive capacity and implementation of new technology for Malaysian construction SME. So she wants to look at what's the absorptive capacity for small medium enterprises to implement new technologies, for example. So she introduced a conceptual framework to see how do you make a SME implement a new technology or accept a new technology. So these are, if you look at this one, she looks at knowledge, she looks at what's the organization level of acquisition, assimilation, transformation, exploitation. So all these variables are the things that she would need to look at to measure probably the absorptive capacity and to see the outcome of it. Now, if we're going to look at the same topic, I can also use a theoretical framework by introducing system theory. Or not just, this is an example of a theory. I want to use system theory, it's been established a long time ago, to explain how, for example, to explain how an organization can accept this new technology in rural areas. Or if I don't want to use system theory, I can use another theory, popular theory called technology acceptance model, right? To explain this, and you can add new variables to the model. So you want to introduce a new theory by modifying it a little bit to explain the context of your research. Okay, so basically that's the difference between conceptual and theoretical. Okay,